Hello, class. How are you doing today, everyone? Hello, my dear students. I hope you guys all found your seats okay. Hello, everyone. Hello. I'm drinking my morning coffee. I hope you guys have all done the same. I hope you guys have brought your notebooks and your pen and all that stuff. You're gonna need it because today's class is pretty advanced. If you guys haven't done Normal Summon 101, you are not in the right class. Okay, that's down the hall. So make sure that you have completed that class before you come here. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, class. Today is a very special day. This is basically how I'm bringing back the ruling content on the channel. Today's class is advanced. I was up very, very late getting all the slides ready yesterday because today I decided we're going to be talking about the damage step, but super intricate. Like I promise you, there will be no stone unturned. This is very important with the current Tenpai meta. It is. It actually is. But not just for Tenpai. There's a lot of niche interactions that most people won't know. I can guarantee you, a top level player such as Jesse Cotton or someone like that could watch this stream and learn something. I'm not even kidding. So grab your pen and paper, ladies and gentlemen, because it's time to cook. Can I use the bathroom? No. You should have thought of that before you came into my classroom. Now sit the fuck down. So, the damage step. We all know it. We all love it. It is a very integral part of the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! When we're playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, we use the damage step almost every single game unless you're a runic player. In which case, you have to go to Runic 101 down the hall. Thank you very much. So the damage step happens every single time you battle. But what actually is the damage step? We'll get into that. We'll get into that very shortly. But before we begin, who am I? I'm Professor Distant Coder. You can just call me Professor Coder. Distant is my first name legally. And Coder is my last name, obviously. So Professor Coder, that's the fancy way. All right, that's what I like. You can call me Coder. I'm one of those cool teachers. I'm a senior judge on Dueling Book, meaning that I kind of know my shit. I haven't taken a judge call in a minute, but as you know, the teachers, they don't actually do the thing. They just teach the thing. I'm RC0 qualified when it comes to official Konami judging, which, you know, RC0 is kind of like Tier 0. Kind of, if you think about it. It's kind of like Tier 0. Well, I don't know what RC1, RC2 is. What is that? What is that? I passed 3rd grade math with flying colors, might I add. I won a single regional. I won one, which is more than most people have. Therefore, it's very clear that I am very much qualified to be teaching this class. I like punk rock and ice cream. My favorite flavor is Heavenly Hash. I'm a Pisces, and my birthstone is Amethyst, which means that I am very creative. Also, before we get started, huge shoutouts to Inner Crescent for making this classroom. Fantastic. They did a fantastic job. So we're going to get into the very first chapter. The introduction. What is the damage step? Who is the damage step? Why is the damage step?
Do you wear
The damage step.
No, I do not.
Have you won
The damage step. Who is this lecture for? Why am I doing this? Professor, why are we even here? Why do we care about the damage step? Well, there's two kinds of people that would care about the damage step. The first is for players to get better and understanding more intricate interactions. This is for you. I'm sure it's happened a lot of times. You'll be playing Master Duel or you'll be playing a game, you know, in TCG and paper where some interaction will happen in the damage step and you're like, I didn't understand. Why did it work that way? If you understood it, you might not have misplayed. I'm looking at you, Timmy. I know you misplayed. I know you tried to activate Ash Blossom in the damage step, and you're going to learn today why you can't do that. You're going to learn today, buddy. The game did not bug. You bugged it. The other people that this is for is actually for judges who want to gain better game knowledge. Now, this is not calling anyone out, but there are a lot of judges out there that make ruling mistakes. We've heard it all the time, right? Someone will go to a regional or a YCS, they go, this judge made a mistake on this ruling and stuff like that. Well, this is actually because a lot of the knowledge that you're going to be finding in today's lecture isn't easy to find. So the goal is for me to bring all of the information that I have accessible to me and make it kind of more widely accessible. It's here for you all, the players and the judges, to have a resource that you can go back and revisit to then learn about the damage step and like memorize everything and get everything down. Now, can you guys answer this question? My Immortal Phoenix Gearfried, equipped with a Moon Mirror Shield, attacks my opponent's face-down defense position, El Shaddai construct, while my opponent has Purple Poison Magician in their scale. How would this battle resolve assuming all legal effects are activated? If this seems confusing or daunting to you, this lecture is going to fix that for you, okay? We are going to give you guys the full rundown of everything you need to know for this lecture in order to be able to answer a question like this. Too much words? Can I go to the toilet? No. Sit down. So basically, this is like a more slightly complicated question. It's not necessarily like the hardest question to answer, but it's definitely the kind of thing where, you know, at first can seem daunting.
Teacher, is there going to be a test?
Yes, this is all going to be on the exam, and the exam counts for 40% of your grade, so make sure that you're taking notes. So, what is the damage step? We're going to start from the very beginning. It's the period during which battle between monsters is performed. So basically, the damage step is when 2 monsters enter battle. The damage step is how you determine what monsters are going to be destroyed by that battle, how much damage is going to be dealt to either player, and it's also a list of actions that need to happen to determine the result of battle. So basically, you can view the damage step as kind of like a grocery list that you go through all the checks and steps in order to determine all of the individual things that need to happen during a battle in order for that battle to play out correctly. Lots of battle in today. Take a shot every time I say battle. So what happens in the damage step? Let's talk about it. Monsters battle and damage is inflicted, and cards are moved and or destroyed. Very simple. This is the basic stuff. If you don't know this, I'm catching you up, okay? Drinking in class. No, but take a shot of water, obviously. Stay hydrated, class. Stay hydrated. On top of that, effects are activated as part of the damage step itself or in response to actions which occur during the damage step. So the damage step is a situation in the game where you are allowed to activate cards and effects. However, with a little bit of a caveat, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Why is the damage step unique, and why is it that so many people think the damage step is so daunting? I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen Farfa in a lot of my videos and stuff like that. Farfa's constantly asking about, how does this work in the damage step? How does that work in the damage step? Why is the damage step so different? And why is it that so many people look at it and go, oh, damage step rulings don't make any sense, whatever. It is what it is. The damage step operates very differently than the rest of the game. It doesn't function like any of the other like phases and stuff like that in the game. It doesn't function like the draw phase, like the standby phase. It operates by its own unique set of rules, and that's why it's so unique and complicated. And there's also a limit to what you can and can't use while you're in the damage step, which is also the thing that confuses a lot of people. This is the situation of, why game bug? Why can't I Ash Sangan? And this is the reason why, is because there's certain effects that can or can't be used in the damage step, which is the type of thing where a lot of people know some of the things that can and can't be used in the damage step, but I can guarantee you right now that a majority of you don't actually know all of the things that you can and cannot do in the damage step. It breaks a lot of the game rules. A lot of the stuff that function everywhere else in the game don't function in the damage step, which is why it's so unique. So it's difficult to understand overall, and the reason of this lecture. So how does it work? It's about to get real, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone hydrate, get your notepads out. This is extremely, extremely important. It's very important. All right. So I love that I messed this up. What card effects can be activated during the damage step? So let's start from point 5 and work our way back, shall we? Cards that say that they can be activated in the damage step can be activated during the damage step. Fantastic. 6 trigger effects, which activate when the card itself is moved. So for example, if you have a card that says, if a monster you control is sent to the graveyard, activate something, that cannot be used in the damage step, as opposed to if a card says, if this card is sent to the graveyard, that can be used in the damage step. That's where the intricacy is there. And then number 7, fast effects, which directly modify attack and defense, can be used in the damage step with a little bit of an asterisk. We'll talk about that later, because this is the only point of the 7 points here. We'll get to the other 4 here in a sec, but this is the only point of the 7 points here that is only true for a portion of the damage step and not the entirety of the damage step. Then on top of that, point 1, mandatory effects. Not only do mandatory effects are they allowed to be used in the damage step, they must be used in the damage step. Mandatory effects are by nature mandatory, so if you can activate them, which you can in the damage step, you must. Counter traps. Any and all counter traps. If a counter trap meets its activation requirement, you are allowed to activate that counter trap in the damage step. Counter traps are always allowed to be used in the damage step, unless otherwise stated. Fast effects, which negate specifically activations. This is the one that throws a lot of people off with the Ash Blossom thing, for example. Ash Blossom is an effect that negates. Why can't I use Ash Blossom in the damage step? Well, the reason why is because Ash Blossom negates the effect rather than negate the activation. That's the reason why you can activate something like Borreload Savage Dragon to negate the activation of a card, as opposed to Ash Blossom, which would negate the effect. If you can negate the activation, then you're allowed to use it in the damage step. And then last but not least, effects that specify a damage step timing. What this means is effects that say something along the lines of at the start of the damage step, before damage calculation, during damage calculation, after damage calculation. Effects that specify a specific moment, a specific timing in the damage step can be used in the damage step, but only during that timing, obviously. So those are the 7 kinds of effects that can be used during the damage step. For example, a mandatory effect here would be something along the lines of the effect of, let's say, No Penguin. So No Penguin says, during either player's turn, when an effect of a penguin monster is activated, a mandatory quick effect, special summon this card from your graveyard. This is a mandatory fast effect. Let's say, for example, your opponent attacks into your face down Penguin Soldier. You can activate No Penguin. Not only can you, but you must activate No Penguin because it is a mandatory effect. Counter traps in general, that's pretty obvious. Any counter trap that meets its activation requirement in the damage step can be used. Fast effects which negate activations. We've explained Borreload Savage versus Ash Blossom. Effects that specify damage step timing, that's just in the text. Very simple, very basic. Cards that say that they can be activated in the damage step. There are certain effects. If you have specific effects that just specify in their text that they can be used in the damage step. Then you have trigger effects, which activate when the card itself is moved. This is any monster that has an effect if destroyed by battle, any effect that says if this card is sent to the graveyard, if this card is banished, or something like that. If it itself is moved, and keep in mind, one little caveat of 0.6 over here is that this only applies to cards whose effect only triggers exclusively when it itself is moved. Let's say, for example, you had a card that had an effect if itself is moved or another card is moved, then even if it itself is moved, it would not trigger. It needs its trigger activation requirement to only be if it itself is moved in some way. And then fast effects that directly modify attack and defense. We're talking Shrink. We're talking any sort of quick effect, attack buff, attack debuff, with a little bit of a twist, but we'll talk about that later. I can use flip effects in the damage step, yes, and we will even get to the point at explaining when they activate or not. So, before we get to the damage step, let's explain how we get to the damage step. Now that we know what we can and cannot use in the damage step, we'll know exactly at which point those rules about what you can and cannot use apply. So first you have the start step of the battle phase. This is when you enter the battle phase. You are not yet in the damage step. This is like a mini standby phase that exists at the start of the battle phase. So whenever either player enters the battle phase, you have this little step called the start step of the battle phase where both players are allowed to activate quick effects. Basically, just follow the fast effect timing chart when it comes to that. That was in Fast Effects 101. If you guys didn't listen to that class, that's on you. Then you have the battle step. The battle step is where players can declare, the turn player can declare attacks, and then only after that, if a player declares an attack and neither player chooses to activate anything and both players decide to enter the damage step, is the damage step entered. At which point, when you enter the damage step, you will follow the 5 sub-steps of the damage step, and this is where things get a little bit more complicated. Now first, what do these numbers mean? A lot of you play Master Duel. I know some of y'all are playing Master Duel right now. I know you are. I can see, I can smell it. What do these numbers mean? What is this little red 2 and the little red 5? What do those mean? Well, those numbers represent the substeps of the damage step. So even in Master Duel, even though they didn't explain it very well in the game itself, the game does have an indicator for which substep of the damage step you're in. And most people aren't even aware of this. But there's 5 substeps to the damage step, and they are displayed on Master Duel. So anytime you enter the damage step in Master Duel, the game will go through substeps 1 through 5. Usually, if there's no effects that you can activate in those substeps, it'll just send it. It'll just go through all of them very quickly. However, if you specifically want to activate an effect in a certain timing of the damage step, like let's say you have a forbidden droplet or something and you choose that you want to activate it in the second substep of the damage step, if you toggle on, you can skip through each individual substep and then choose in which substep you want to activate it. So yes, this is part of Master Duel. It's just not explained very well. But after this, you'll be able to understand it perfectly. So 5 substeps, let's get talking to them. Hello, substeps. Everyone say hi to the substeps of the damage step as they appear one at a time. At first, we have the start of the damage step. Basic. That's crazy. You were starting from the beginning. That's crazy. Then, substep 2, is before damage calculation. Substep 3, perform damage calculation or during damage calculation. Usually we'll say perform damage calculation, but this is the timing in which cards that say during damage calculation can be activated. So we'll just refer to it as perform damage calculation or during damage calculation. Both of those are interchangeable. So if I say one or the other, just know I'm talking about substep 3. Substep 4 is after damage calculation, which you can see on a lot of effect text. A lot of effects say, after damage calculation, do this, do that, something like that. And then the end of the damage step. These are the 5 substeps. So whenever you're playing on Master Duel and you see that there's those numbers on the turn counter, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 specifically refer to start step, start of the damage step, before damage calculation, perform damage calculation, after damage calculation, and end of the damage step. So let's get into it. The start of the damage step, substep 1. So we're going to go over each of the different substeps and what can and cannot happen in those substeps, and also what must and mustn't happen in those substeps of the damage step. What must happen in the start of the damage step is you declare that you're entering the damage step. This is basically the first thing that happens is you declare your attack, and then once both players agree to enter the damage step, then you are at the start of the damage step, substep 1. Any and all effects that say that they can be activated at the start of the damage step will be activated here. And you have a lot of effects like this. Now keep in mind, at the start of the damage step, if a monster is face down that is being attacked, it's not flipped up yet. At this substep of the damage step, if a monster is face down and is being attacked, it is not yet flipped face up. It remains face down. Fast effects that can be activated during the damage step, those are points 1 through 7 that we looked at before. Any and all of those kinds of effects can be activated here, as well as fast effects that directly modify attack and defense can still be used at this point. Keep in mind, I mentioned at that point number 7 earlier, is specifically a point where you can activate it in the damage step, but only during specific substeps. This substep is one of which you can activate effects that modify stats. Now keep in mind, when I talk about effects that directly modify stats, I mean that the effect itself has to have an effect to modify a stat. A lot of people back in Zodiac format, what they would want to do, because Zodiac monsters gain attack equal to the attack and defense of all Zodiac monsters attached to it, they thought that they were allowed to activate Whiptail in the damage step, because, oh, if I attach this Whiptail as a material to one of my Zodiac XCs, then its stats will go up. However, keep in mind the effect of Whiptail attaches itself. The effect of Whiptail does not directly modify stats. So even though the interaction would allow you to modify stats, because the effect you're activating is not one which modifies stats, the Zodiac Whiptail's effect to attach is not an effect that can be allowed to be used in the damage step. So this is the start of the damage step. Very simple, very basic. And if you move on, you go to before damage calculation, substep number 2. Arguably one of the more important ones, because this is actually one that has a lot of implication. The first thing that will happen in before damage calculation, if the monster that is being attacked is face down, you'll flip it face up. If it has an effect when flipped, it doesn't activate at this time, okay? So if the monster has a flip effect, this is not the moment at which flip effects activate. Also, if the monster has an effect when flipped face up, i.e. Alistair the Invoker, for example, Alistair says if this card is normal summoned or flip face up at invocation, if you attack into a face down Alistair the Invoker, it'll flip up during before damage calculation. However, it won't activate during before damage calculation. It'll activate later on in the damage step, which we'll get to in a moment. What can happen? Effects that activate before damage calculation can be activated here. Simple. Fast effects that can be activated during the damage step, and fast effects that directly modify attack and defense can still be used at this point. However, this is the last moment in which they can be used. As soon as you move on to the next substep, substep 3, these types of effects are no longer allowed to be used in the damage step. After before damage calculation, obviously, what is the next step after before damage calculation? Well, it's performing damage calculation or during damage calculation. This one is a little bit finicky. So keep in mind at this point, you're no longer allowed to activate fast effects that directly modify stats. What must happen? You will compare attack and defense and apply life point damage. Okay, this is the substep in which this occurs, where you actually compare the stats between your monsters, and then you have to determine if one of the monsters would be destroyed by that battle. But if a monster would be destroyed by this battle, at this point, the monster is not sent to the graveyard. However, it is marked for destruction. So this is something that's important to know. is what you can and cannot do with a monster that is marked for destruction. Throwing a paper airplane through the classroom. Cosmic Pajama, you're expelled. You're banned. Get out of here. Detention. Weekend detention even. Anytime you're playing on Mass Duel, right? You ever see where two monsters battle and then a monster's all like cracked? Like it's all cracking and being destroyed, but like randomly stays on field for a little extra time? That's what that is. The monster is marked for destruction. However, it remains on the field. Now, we're going to have to talk about what you can and cannot do with a monster that is marked for destruction. This is where you trigger flip effects, right? Incorrect. Flip effects still do not trigger here. So what can happen, effects that activate during damage calculation, activate and resolve before you perform damage calculation. So if you have any effects that specifically activate during damage calculation, they would go on chain here before you do the comparison of attack and defense and apply life point damage. Basically, what you have to look at in terms of during damage calculation is that there's two steps to this. There's the step at the beginning of it where you can activate your effects that trigger during damage calculation. And then after that, the last thing that you'll be doing in during damage calculation is like, okay, nothing else has to be activated. We can now move on to actually comparing the stats, which is performing that actual damage calculation. And performing that actual damage calculation is a really, really important point. Very, very important part. An easy example, exactly. Mech Knight Crusader Avermax. Mech Knight Crusader Avermax says, during damage calculation, if this card battles an opponent's special summon monster, you can make Avermax gain attack equal to that opponent's monster's attack. This is the point at which that would activate. And then obviously you can still use fast effects that can be activated during the damage step, i.e. counter traps, mandatory effects, that sort of thing. Fast effects that directly modify attack and defense cannot be activated anymore. You cannot use them in the substep. When does the BA die, though? We're going to talk about that. The BA dies at a very strange point, but first we need to talk about marked for destruction. So what I've explained here is that if a monster is determined to be being destroyed by the battle in question, then that monster will be marked for destruction. So what does that mean? What is marked for destruction? If my monster on Mass Duel looks all crackly because he's being destroyed by this battle, what can I do? What can't I do with it? What are all the intricacies there? If a monster is determined to be destroyed by battle during damage calculation, then that monster is marked for destruction. A monster marked for destruction remains on the field until later on in the damage step. So you do not send it to the graveyard here. It actually stays on the field for the remaining substeps. It only gets sent in substep 5, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Animation! Blue Eyes White Dragon kills Ratpier. It is marked for destruction! Effects. That's crazy. Look at this guy. So a monster marked for destruction, it cannot be targeted. It cannot be returned to the hand or deck. It cannot be used to pay optional costs. So if you have an effect that would activate, for example, after damage calculation, if a monster is marked for destruction and you have an optional effect that would be able to tribute a monster for cost, for example, or something like that, you would not be allowed to tribute a monster that's marked for destruction. It cannot have its battle position changed. It cannot have its control changed. It cannot apply its continuous effects. And it cannot activate its optional fast effects. So those are the things you cannot do with a monster that is marked for destruction. Monsters that are marked for destruction can be destroyed or banished by effects. Let's say, for example, hypothetically, you have a monster that says, if this card battles an opponent's monster, after damage calculation, destroy it. Let's say the monster has that effect is bigger than the opponent's monster that it's attacking. It'll mark it for destruction by battle, but then it'll destroy it via its card effect. At which point that monster is determined to be destroyed by card effect, not destroyed by battle. It can be used to pay mandatory effect costs. A really, really good example of this, actually, is Doom Caliber Knight. When a monster effect is activated, quick effect, mandatory effect, tribute this face-up card, negate that activation, and if you do, destroy that monster. So let's say my opponent attacked over my Doom Caliber Knight with some monster that has an effect that triggers after damage calculation. At this point, they would attack over my Doom Caliber Knight. My Doom Caliber Knight would be marked for destruction. However, when they trigger their effect during after damage calculation, which is when my Doom Cal is marked for destruction, however, not yet sent to the graveyard. In this situation, if they were to activate their monster effect during after damage calculation, substep 4, my Doom Caliber Knight, because it is a mandatory effect, will still activate, will still tribute itself to negate and destroy the activation of that opponent's monster effect. As opposed to if Doom Caliber Knight was an optional effect, then it would fall under this bullet point over here, activate its optional fast effects. Next, it can have its effects negated. You can negate the effects of a monster that is marked for destruction. It can apply its unclassified effects. An unclassified effect, typically the most common unclassified effect that would apply here is, for example, the kaiju's restriction on only having one kaiju on the field, on your side of the field at a time. So let's say, for example, I have a face-up kaiju and a face-down kaiju, and my opponent attacks into my face-down kaiju and marks it for destruction. That face-down kaiju will still be able to apply its unclassified effect and send itself to the graveyard because you're only allowed to control one kaiju, which is different than how the Burning Abyss monsters work, which we'll talk about right after this. It can activate its mandatory fast effect, meaning Doom Caliber Knight, obviously, and it can activate its trigger/flip effect, which is important because otherwise flip effects just wouldn't work. You would specifically, if this wasn't the case, you would specifically need your flip effect monster to survive the battle in order to be allowed to activate its flip effect, meaning it would be ass. So flip effect monsters, even if they are marked for destruction, they are still allowed to activate their flip effects. So then we get to substep 4, after damage calculation, substep 4. So this is after you have performed damage calculation, and after you've performed damage calculation, you've determined if one or both or none of the monsters that battled are marked for destruction. And then at that point, what must happen? Field checks for cards such as Gozen Match and Rivalry of Warlords happen immediately. So what this means, when it comes to a card like Gozen Match or Rivalry of Warlords, if you have, let's say, a Rivalry of Warlords or a Gozen Match on board, and your face down monster is of the incorrect type or attribute and gets flipped, it's not sent to the grave until after damage calculation. So it would remain on the field despite the fact that Gozen Match and Rivalry are on field until this substep here, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Monsters marked for destruction still remain on the field here. They're still not sent to the grave. So a monster that's marked for destruction will remain on the field during substep 3, as well as the entirety of substep 4. What can happen? Effects that activate after damage calculation are activated here. Effects that activate when battle damage is inflicted or when you take damage, activate here. Flip effects and effects that activate when this card is flipped face up also activate here. So keep in mind, this is an example of a monster with a flip effect or a monster with a trigger effect that triggers when flipped face up, even if they are marked for destruction, can activate. Alistair the Invoker, if it's flipped face up, if you attack over an Alistair the Invoker, even though that is an optional trigger effect, it's an optional trigger effect that triggers when this card is flipped face up, therefore it is allowed to be used here. So you're allowed to activate Alistair the Invoker even if the Alistair is marked for destruction. Also, fast effects that can be activated during the damage step, that's points 1 through 7, with the exception of point 7, because as we said, point 7, which is fast effects that can only be used to change stats, cannot be used after substep 2. Substeps 1 and 2 are the only ones you can use those in. So field checks, what the heck does that mean? What the flip, Professor Coder? What do you mean field checks? So with a card like Gozen Match, for example, right? Immediately upon entering after damage calculation, cards like Gozen Match will apply their effects. So like I said, you control a face-up fire monster and a face-down water monster, and your opponent attacks into your face-down water monster. You go through the substeps of the damage step that we talked about up until this point. Start of the damage step, the monster still face down. Before damage calculation, monster flips face up. At this point, yes, you control a fire and a water monster. However, the field checks, as we've said, only apply once you reach substep 4. So at this point, uniquely, you are allowed to control a fire and a water monster both at the same time under Gozen Match because of the specific rules of the damage step. Then you go to perform damage calculation. You'll perform damage calculation. You'll apply any sort of life point damage that needs to be applied if there's any that needs to be applied, and determine if a monster would be destroyed by that battle. Once you go to the field check, which happens right at the start of substep 4, right at the start of after damage calculation, in this situation, if my face down water gets flipped face up and is marked for destruction, Gozen Match will, after damage calculation, force that water monster to be sent by Gozen Match, in which case, if that monster has an effect when this card is destroyed by battle, it won't be able to activate that effect, despite the fact that the monster did battle, was marked for destruction by that battle, but before the monster was sent to the graveyard via the battle destruction, it was sent to the graveyard by applying the Gozen Match. In that case, that monster is not considered to have been destroyed by that battle. It's considered to be sent via the game mechanics because of Gozen Match. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is that if a monster has a flip effect or an effect when flipped face up, and that monster is sent by Gozen Match right at the start of after damage calculation, it won't be able to activate its effect because monsters need to be where they meet their trigger in order to activate. So the same situation, but let's change up the cards a little bit. I control a face-up light monster and a face-down Alistair the Invoker. And there's a Gozen Match on the field and my opponent attacks my Alistair the Invoker. As we said, Alistair the Invoker will flip face up, you'll perform damage calculation. Even if Alistair is marked for destruction, that Alistair in after damage calculation, substep 4, will still be allowed to activate its effect. However, the field check applied by Gozen Match actually applies before any flip effects or trigger effects would be allowed to activate. So for that reason, you would apply Gozen Match, and Gozen Match would force you to send your Alistair the Invoker from field to grave before the Alistair has the chance to activate its effect. So in that situation, you would not be able to activate the effect of Alistair the Invoker. So this is a really neat interaction when it comes to like Gozen Match. And then note, cards such as Gozen Match force the new attribute to be the one sent. Now, field checks also apply for another type of card. And this is what we talk about Burning Abyss monsters. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about why and when the BA dies. Let's say, for example, I have a face down, let's use Farfa. Just because I'm a fan of this one. Let's use Farfa. Let's say I have a face down Farfa male branch of the Burning Abyss, and I control another monster on the field that is not a Burning Abyss monster. So Farfa says, if you control a monster that is not a Burning Abyss monster, destroy this card. The thing that you have to keep in mind is that effects such as the effect of Farfa male branch of the Burning Abyss, these like continuous effects, they only start applying after damage calculation. In substep 4 is when you start applying these continuous effects. So the reason why this is important is that if I control a face-up monster that's not a Burning Abyss and a face-down Farfa, and my opponent attacks my Farfa, and my Farfa flips face up, it will operate in the same way as those flip effects where there is no check of when these would activate or apply until substep 4 after damage calculation. So what this means is if they attack my Farfa, even though I control a non-Burning Abyss monster, will still remain face up on the field during substeps 2 and 3, and it's only during substep 4 that it'll apply its continuous effect. With a caveat. Keep this in mind, there is one very specific thing that you need to remember. Remember when we talked about monsters that are marked for destruction, chat? Let's talk about monsters marked for destruction. What do we say about a monster marked for destruction? They cannot apply its continuous effects. Meaning that in this situation where I have a face-up non-Burning Abyss and a face-down Farfa, if my opponent attacks into my Farfa, if the monster that they're attacking with does not mark my Farfa for destruction, then in that case, once we reach substep 4, my Farfa will destroy itself by applying its own continuous effect because it wasn't marked for destruction. However, if my opponent attacks into my Farfa with a monster that's bigger than my Farfa, it'll mark my Farfa for destruction, in which case, in substep 4, my Farfa cannot apply its continuous effect, meaning that it actually remains on the field and would be destroyed by battle once we reach substep 5, end of the damage step. Either way, Farfa is out, yes, but what's important is when the Farfa, it's literally when the BA die. That's the thing that's important. So if my Farfa is not being marked for destruction by battle, then it will destroy itself via its own card effect in substep 4 after damage calculation. As opposed to, if my Farfa is marked for destruction, then it can't apply its continuous effect in order to destroy itself, in which case it'll stay alive until end of the damage step, where the first thing to happen is that the monster or monsters marked for destruction are sent to the graveyard before anything else happens. They're sent to the graveyard because they're destroyed by battle specifically. So if we don't kill the BA in battle, it will die earlier, correct. Why does it matter when the BA dies? It's when the BA dies and how the BA dies that also matters. Let's say, for example, you have a card on your field that says, if a monster you control is destroyed by card effect, draw a card, for example. If I have a face-down Burning Abyss monster and a face-up non-Burning Abyss monster, and my opponent attacks my Burning Abyss monster, if they mark it for destruction, then that BA will not destroy itself via its own card effect, and will die by battle, subsequently not triggering your effect to draw a card. Versus if it was not destroyed by that battle, then it would trigger to destroy itself by its own card effect. So, end of the damage step, what must happen? The first thing that happens in Substep 5, end of the damage step, monsters marked for destruction are sent to the grave before anything else happens. And then you apply any effects that trigger as a result of the monsters being destroyed by battle or leaving the field and so on. So something like a Mystic Tomato, it would activate right here at the end of the damage step. So Mystic Tomato gets destroyed by battle. It's marked for destruction, destroyed by battle, would trigger at that point. If no more effects are activated and you would leave the damage step, effects that apply until the end of the damage step stop applying at that point. So that's basically the last thing that'll occur is, okay, we're about to leave the damage step, like we're about to leave end of the damage step. Any effects that apply until the end of the damage step stop applying at this point, simply put. And then also in the end of the damage step, what can happen, effects that activate when a monster is destroyed by battle or destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard will activate here. Effects that activate when a monster destroys a monster by battle or destroys and sends it to the graveyard. Effects that activate at the end of the damage step. Fast effects that can be activated during the damage step. And the end of the damage step cannot end until any and all subsequent chains have resolved. Now, this is a question that is asked a lot, and we're going to be debunking it, all right? Explaining the complex shit. Are you ready? Chapter 3, complex shit incoming. This is the difficult stuff. So we've now talked about how the damage step works, how each of the individual substeps work. But now we move on to actually applying it. Do you guys understand how each of the 5 different substeps of the damage step function? Yes, smile. That's inspiring, yeah. Keep in mind, everything that I ran down up until this point is one battle. This is one battle. All of this happens, everything that we just outlined here happens in one battle every single time monsters battle. Every single time. So let's move on. Explaining the complex shit. Time for the complicated stuff, because what we learned so far was so simple, right? Step 1 of complex shit, all right? Continuous traps in the damage step. This one is an interesting one. And this is something that a lot of people don't super understand well. Continuous trap cards with an optional fast effect that modifies attack and defense can be activated during the damage step. So they have an optional quick effect that allows you to change stats. You can activate that continuous trap in the damage step. However, you have to activate that optional quick effect simultaneously with the activation of that continuous trap. Examples of this are True Draco Apocalypse and Castle of Dragon Souls. So True Draco Apocalypse specifically has an effect that says you can target another True Draco or True King card you control, destroy it, and if you do, you half the attack and defense of all face-up monsters your opponent controls. And then Castle of Dragon Soul says, once per turn you can banish a dragon monster from your grave, then target a monster you control, it gains 700 attack. So you're allowed to flip this continuous trap that's face down, face up, during substeps 1 and 2 of the damage step. However, you need to use the effect alongside it in order to be allowed to activate the trap. So in substeps 1 or 2 of the damage step, if I want to activate True Draco Apocalypse, I can flip it up and use the effect simultaneously, but I'm not allowed to choose to only flip up the trap without activating the effect. Now, the more intricate thing about continuous traps in the damage step is when continuous traps have a continuous effect to buff stats. So not an activated effect that modifies stats, but a continuous one that applies as long as the card is face up on the field. So continuous trap cards with a continuous effect that modifies attack and defense can be activated during the damage step, specifically substeps 1 and 2, because just as a reminder, in substeps 3 through 5, you're not allowed to activate any quick effects or any effects that would modify stats. It's too late to use those. You can only use those in substeps 1 and 2. Note that the continuous effect does not necessarily need to modify the attack and defense of monsters currently on the field, so long as the continuous effect meets the requirements to apply in general. A good example of this is Dark Contract with the Witch. Dark Contract with the Witch has an effect to pop a card, but it also says all fiend-type monsters you control gain 1,000 attack during your opponent's turn only. So during your opponent's battle phase, if they were to attack you or something like that, you are allowed to activate Dark Contract with the Witch during substeps 1 or 2 of the damage step, even if you don't control a fiend monster. So even though the Dark Contract with the Witch wouldn't apply to any of the monsters you control, because it does have an effect that legally can be used in those 2 substeps of the damage step, you're allowed to flip up Dark Contract with the Witch. However, you're not allowed to choose to use the effect to pop or something like that as part of its activation, because that kind of effect is not an effect that can be legally activated. So when it comes to Dark Contract with the Witch, you can choose to just flip it up in the damage step in substeps 1 and 2, but not apply any of the other effects. Unpossessed, same thing, because it buffs all your familiar possessed monsters by 800 attack. Next up, an interesting one. Multiple chains in the damage step. A lot of people seem to believe that there cannot be multiple chains in a given substep of the damage step. Now, this is something that is like kind of true, but people understand it incorrectly. They understand it for the wrong reasons. I will debunk something, all right? I'm going to break the curriculum here, chat. We're going to skip a slide. We're going to skip to the next slide, okay? We'll skip to the next slide first because I think this will explain it better. So this is false. The following statement is false. There can only be 1 chain during the damage step. That is a false statement. And a lot of people also say there can only be 1 chain during any given substep of the damage step, which is not true. What they mean by this is the simple example that happens when 2 Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax battle each other. I need you guys to note this down. Get your notepads, get your notebooks, get your pens and all that stuff. If a card has the activation timing of a specific substep of the damage step. So let's say a card says at the start of the damage step, before damage calculation, during damage calculation, or something like that. If it names one of the substeps of the damage step, then that effect can only be used in the very first chain in that substep of the damage step. So an example here is Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax. Avermax specifically says once per battle during damage calculation. If this card battles a special summon monster, quick effect, which during damage calculation it names a specific timing, you can make this card gain attack equal to that opponent's monster's attack during that damage calculation only. So the reason why that's important is specifically because when it comes to Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax, it can only be activated in the first chain of during damage calculation, which is why you have that really neat, intricate interaction when 2 Avermaxes battle. So let's say I have an Avermax and my opponent has an Avermax, and they battle. Because I'm turn player, I have to activate my Avermax first, meaning that it'll go from 3,000 to 6,000 attack. And my opponent would have to chainlink to their Avermax because Avermax can only go in the very first chain during damage calculation. So in this situation, what that means is that my Avermax is chainlink 1, their Avermax is chainlink 2, their Avermax gains my Avermax's stats, goes up to 6,000, and then my Avermax resolves afterwards, gains their Avermax's stats, goes up to 9,000, my Avermax wins. And there's a lot of people that tried to do the thing where I go, oh, I activate my Avermax chainlink 1, and they go, okay, resolves, new chain, I activate my Avermax, so my Avermax gains the 6,000 your Avermax has. Which, a lot of times, players will explain and say, you can't do that because there can be only 1 chain in the damage calculation. Which is not true. However, they're right for the wrong reason. They're right because if a card specifies an activation timing for the activation of their effects, then that effect can only go in the very first chain of that substep. Now, a lot of people were talking to me about the Tenpai cards, so let's talk about those. A good example of this, so they're like, if I have a Chandra, and I go, okay, Chandra battle, start of the damage step, activate the effect of Special Lakai. Then summon Fadra. Fadra effect, because it says if this card is normal special summoned, or at the start of the damage step, you can target level 4 lower fire monster, summon it. So if you go Chandra, summon Fadra, Fadra meets its activation requirement, because it says if this card is normal or special summoned, not because it says start of the damage step. If it only said at the start of the damage step, you wouldn't be able to use it. If you flip that around, so let's say I go Fadra declare an attack. Fadra effect at the start of the damage step to revive a level 4 lower fire dragon. I apply Fadra effect, revive Chandra. Chandra says at the start of the damage step, which the Chandra is revived and we are still at the start of the damage step. However, we are no longer in the first chain of start of the damage step. Therefore, in that new chain, you cannot activate the Chandra. The Fadris battle would have to go through fully, and then only after another monster battles can you use the Chandra. So let's move on. Let's go back here. All right. Multiple chains in the damage step. We just talked about how you cannot have multiple chains with effects that specify a specific activation timing. However, if subsequent chains are formed during the damage step, you do not move to the next substep until any and all chains have resolved. So let's take, for example, Fiendish Rhino Warrior. I'm going to present to you a very funny moment, a very strange situation that will likely have you guys type what in all caps in the chat. So remember when I said that when a monster is marked for destruction, its continuous effect stops applying. However, that monster remains on the field. Very important to remember this. So let's say, hypothetical scenario, you control Fiendish Rhino Warrior with a Burning Abyss monster on the field. So Fiendish Rhino Warrior has the continuous effect that says, Fiend monsters you control, except itself, can't be destroyed by battle or card effect. The way that this interaction would play out, currently my Seer is being protected because of my Fiendish Rhino Warrior, right? So then if my opponent goes Blue Eyes White Dragon, attack my Fiendish Rhino Warrior. Then we go through the substeps, you know, start of the damage step, before damage calculation, perform damage calculation, I would take 1600. And then here at this point, my Fiendish Rhino Warrior is marked for destruction, at which point its continuous effects do not apply anymore. And then at that point, Seer, in after damage calculation, substep 4, Seer goes, I'm on board with a non-burning abyss. I'm going to destroy myself now. Oh, I'm gonna trigger my effect though. Declare effect. Target the Graph. We're still in substep 4 after damage calculation. Graph summons, and then Graph goes, wait, I'm on board with a non-burning abyss monster. I'm going to destroy myself now. Remember, because the Fiendish Rhino Warrior's continuous effects are not applying because it's marked for destruction. I'm gonna destroy myself now. Oh, but I have an effect. I'm gonna use my effect to summon something. And you go, okay, I'm gonna summon the Libic. I'm gonna summon Libic. We're still in substep 4 after damage calculation. Libic goes, wait, I'm on board with a non-burning abyss. I'm gonna destroy myself now, but I'll use my effect to summon a guy from hand. Boom. And then here, this thing is negated because of the effect of Libic, because Libic negates the effect of the thing it summons. So this doesn't get destroyed. Then you move on to substep 5 after damage calculation, at which point, no, at end of the damage step, sorry, at which point the Fiendish Rhino Warrior is destroyed by battle. And then it can trigger its effect to Foolish Something. And then if it triggers its effect to Foolish Something, and you Foolish Something with an effect, let's say like a Farfa or something like that. I didn't put Farfa in my deck. Let's put Barbar instead. Then Barbar would also trigger during end of the damage step. Barbar banishing 3, burn for 900 type thing. And then this all happened in substeps 4 and 5 of the damage step. Kind of crazy the continuous effect stops applying, but it's still on field. It is very goofy. I agree. I agree with you that it is goofy. Moving on. We've already talked about this. Skipping damage step timings. This is also an interesting one. And this one has important interactions for one very specific card that is played a lot in Yu-Gi-Oh!, in the TCG, in Master Duel, and all that stuff. So let's talk about it. If certain actions occur during the damage step, some substeps of the damage step are not performed. Start of the damage step. If the action occurs within the start of the damage step, then you skip before damage calculation and perform damage calculation. You do not perform them at all. So we're going to be looking at a list of actions that allows you to skip certain substeps of the damage step. And if any of those actions that are listed on the next slide occur, if they occur in start of the damage step, you skip before damage calculation and perform damage calculation. Same thing with before damage calculation. If it happens during before damage calculation, then you skip perform damage calculation. And then if it happens during perform damage calculation, you skip the battle calculation portion of perform damage calculation, which we'll talk about in a sec. So what are the things that cause damage step timings to be skipped? The damage step timing is skipped if the monster being attacked is removed from the respective player's monster zone. So let's say, for example, we enter start of the damage step, right? And this is like the type of thing that you can see very typically with removing a monster with like a forbidden droplet, for example, right? A lot of people talk about this and they go, oh, I'm going to make it so that my opponent doesn't get a replay, but the attack stops. And the way that you do that is by sending your monster during start of the damage step or before damage calculation. So if the monster being attacked, let's say your monster is being attacked, and your monster is removed during one of these 3 steps, then you skip ahead of these 3 steps. You do not perform the rest of them. if the attacking monster is removed from the respective player's monster zone as well. So it could be the monster being attacked or the monster that is attacking. As long as one of the two is removed during substeps 1, 2, or even 3, then you do not get all the way to the end of substep 3. You just skip ahead. The attacking monster has its battle position changed and is unable to perform an attack in that position. So let's say, for example, I attack with a monster, and then by some means in start of the damage step, substep 1, my opponent turns that monster to defense. Then at that point, that monster is no longer able to continue its attack, so you skip ahead in the damage step timing. And then the attacking monster is performing an attack while in face-up defense and becomes unable to perform an attack in face-up defense position. So an example of this would be, let's say my opponent controls a super heavy samurai monster that's in defense, and they swing, attack, and then you go damage step, start a damage step, or before damage calculation, droplet, send a thing, negate their super heavy samurai so it can no longer attack while in defense. Then the attack cannot continue, so you would skip the damage step timings because that attack can't, it basically stops the attack. And then the damage step timing is not skipped if the following things occur. The monster being attacked becomes unable to be targeted for attacks. So let's say one of my monsters can be attacked, my opponent attacks it, started the damage step, I use some effect that makes it so my monster is can no longer be targeted for an attack. Because we've already entered the damage step, that attack still continues. It doesn't stop it. The monster being attacked becomes unable to be attacked, also doesn't stop it. The attacking monster becomes unable to declare attacks. Even though it's unable to declare attacks, if it's reached the damage step, then the battle is happening, so at that point, you're good. Then the attacking monster becomes unable to attack. Same thing. If you already enter the damage step, then you're good. The attacking monster becomes unable to attack. And then the attacking monster is performing an additional attack and becomes unable to perform an additional attack. All these things don't stop the attack from occurring. Basically what this all means, chat. I'm going to dumb this down. Turbo simple. Basically what you need to know is you need to know that there are certain things that can occur during substeps 1 and 2 of the damage step, where if they occur, the damage step cannot continue, so you won't get all the way to the point of actually performing the damage calculation. The things that would make it so that you skip to the next thing is if the guy being attacked leaves, if the guy attacking leaves, if the guy that is attacking is turned to defense in some way and can't attack while in defense, so basically if it's not a super heavy, or if a guy that is attacking while in defense loses the ability to attack while in defense. You will skip all the way to past performing damage calculation, and you will not perform damage calculation. Then when it comes to things that do not skip, that do not make you skip beyond damage calculation, meaning things that won't impact the battle and make the battle still happen, is if the thing being attacked can no longer be targeted for an attack, it was already targeted for an attack, so the attack will continue. If the thing being attacked becomes unable to be attacked, then because it was already attacked, the attack will still continue. The attacking monster becomes unable to declare attacks. The attack has already happened. You are in battle at this point. You're in damage calculation. Well, in the damage step, so the attack will still continue. The attacking monster becomes unable to attack. You've already attacked. You're already in damage step. The battle will continue. The attacking monster becomes unable to attack. Same thing. You're already in battle. The attack will continue. And the attacking monster is performing a second attack. Let's say it has the ability to perform multiple attacks. It performs a second attack and then in damage step loses the ability to perform a second attack. Because you're already in damage step, the attack will still happen. So, battle calculation is an important thing to talk about. So we have the 5 substeps of the damage step. Picture it as if the perform damage calculation substep, substep 3, has like a final little box at the end that you got to check that says we have calculated battle and applied it and everything like that before you move on to substep 4. Just picture that in your head, okay? That checkbox is battle calculation. So performing battle calculation occurs at the end of during damage calculation, substep 3, and is the timing in which damage is dealt and monsters are marked for destruction, which by the way, happens simultaneously. Applying battle damage and all that stuff and marking a monster for destruction happen at the same time. And when these things occur, the monster is marked for destruction, battle damage has been applied and all this stuff, you check that little box. That little checkbox is important, okay? That little checkbox is very important because battle calculation must be performed in order for the monster involved in that attack to be considered to have battled. Chat, pop quiz. What monster in Yu-Gi-Oh's metagame cares about whether or not a monster has battled? Zeus, Divine Arsenal AA Zeus. If you did not get to successfully perform battle calculation and check that little box, that situation, you cannot summon a Zeus. So in order for the summon requirement of Zeus, that specifically says if a monster battled, if an Xyz monster battled, you know whether or not an Xyz monster has battled if there was a battle involved with an Xyz that checked that little box. That little checkbox is what you need to check at least once with a battle with an Xyz monster in order for Zeus to be online. That's the one, it's the one card that's like super, super important to care about with this. So let's say you have an Xyz monster, you attack your opponent's monster, and then before damage calculation, your opponent, I don't know, Droplet sends their monster, you don't get a replay, then your Xyz monster did not battled, therefore you can't make Zeus. A lot of people have this belief that all you have to do is enter the damage step for your monster to be considered to have battled, but that's not true. For your monster to be considered to have battled, you need to have successfully performed battle calculation. So ladies and gentlemen of the classroom, any questions? Ask now or forever hold your peace. This has been Damage Step 101 in 2 hours, might I add. Any questions? Can I go pee? Yes, you can now go pee. Can I sleep with the professor to pass the class? Stay after class, please. Thank you. Do we get to try the purple poison El Shadal question now? Yes. Would you guys like to try the purple poison El Shadal question? Let's put this to the test, okay? It's test time. So the question that we had at hand, chat, says, if my Immortal Phoenix Gearfried that is equipped with Moon Mirror Shield declares an attack on my opponent's face down El Shadal construct while my opponent has a purple poison magician in the scale, assuming all effects, all legally activatable effects are activated, how does this entire damage step play out? So in terms of relevant card text, Gearfried says, at the start of the damage step, if this card attacks, you can equip a face-up monster on the field to this card. Max 1 as an equip spell that gives this card 500 attack. It also has the relevant effect that says when a monster effect is activated, you can send a face-up equip card you control the graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Moon Mirror Shield says, if the equipped monster battles your opponent's monster during damage calculation, the equipped monster's attack and defense becomes equal to the attack and defense, whichever is higher, plus 100. El Shadal Construct says, at the start of the damage step, this card battles a special summon monster, destroy that monster. In the situation, the Gearfried is special summoned. And the Purple Poison Magician's scale effect says, once per turn, if your Dark Spellcaster monster battles, before damage calculation, you can activate this effect. That monster gains 1200 attack until the end of the damage step, then destroy this card. And then if it gets destroyed, you get to target a card on the field, a face-up card on the field, and destroy it. It's not that complicated of an interaction. It just has a lot of different moving parts, and the question is, when does everything apply? I'll rebuild this board state in Dueling Book. So we're going to set this. So it's a set construct with the purple poison. My opponent controls a Gearfried, and I think I have to I'm just going to put it here. We'll assume that this is equipped to his Gearfried, okay? So they go Gearfried effect, Gearfried battle, and they attack into my face down El Shadal construct. So I'm just going to run you guys through the answer so you guys can see, okay? So Gearfried says, at the start of the damage step of this card attacks, you can equip a face-up monster on the field to this card. You can't use that effect because the construct is face down at the start of the damage step. Because remember, start of the damage step is substep 1, and a face down monster that is attacked isn't flipped until substep 2. Meaning that when the activation requirement for Phoenix Gearfried would activate, the construct is still face down, therefore you can't activate the Gearfried. But same thing with construct. Yes, construct is mandatory. That says if it battles a special summon monster, you can destroy it. But it says at the start of the damage step, which once again is also substep 1. So because it's substep 1, start of the damage step, this isn't able to activate because it's face down. So neither the effect of the Gearfried to equip or the effect of the construct to pop are going to be able to trigger. And that's everything that happens in substep 1, start of the damage step. So at this point, you move on to substep 2. First thing that happens, the construct gets flipped face up. But remember, we're past the activation time for construct's effect and Gearfried's effect, so neither one of these will be able to apply their effects. Now, Moon Mirror Shield activates during damage calculation, which is substep 3, which is important to keep in mind. However, Purple Poison Magician says, in the scale, if your Dark Spellcaster type monster battles, let's assume construct is dark because I didn't know this thing was light. We'll assume construct is dark, smiley face, okay? Smiley face. Good teacher, remembers attributes, okay? I'm not an art teacher. I don't know colors. Shadark construct, okay? It's also not a spellcaster. This shit's a fairy? Aren't all Shadals spellcasters? I'm Chat, I made that question at 3 in the fucking morning, okay? Come on now. Give me a break. El Shadal construct is my favorite dark spellcaster, okay? Chat, if you... I need new glasses, man. Okay, chat. El Shadark Constrizzard, okay? Nice. This is a dark spellcaster, smiley face, okay? So in this case, Purple Poison says, before damage calculation, which is substep 2, will legally activate and apply to the very dark spellcaster construct, and then go to the extra deck face up. At which point, the Purple Poison Magician will activate its effect in order to destroy a card on the field. Let's assume that it's targeting the Immortal Phoenix Gearfried. Then at this point, can the Immortal Phoenix Gearfried activate its effect to negate? It says, when a monster effect is activated, quick effect, you can send one face-up equipped card you control to the graveyard to negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Is that a legal activation, chat? Yes, it can. Because Gearfried negates activations, that is an effect that can be used in the damage step. So you can apply this, send this to the graveyard in order to negate and destroy the Purple Poison Magician. But what's really funny is because it negates and destroys it, the Purple Poison gets destroyed from the extra deck, goes to the grave, and then this triggers again and gets to pop a card. Because it's an effect that triggers when this card is moved in some way. Because it is moved in some way, including if it's destroyed in the extra deck and goes to the grave. These are all legal effects that can be activated in the damage step, so this would get destroyed as well. Boom. You can destroy cards in the extra deck? Yes, you can destroy cards in the extra deck. So as you can see, my dark spellcaster El Shadal construct lives in this situation. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that sick? It's dope interaction. It's a really cool one to know. But to know like what can and can't be activated in the damage step. Like if you didn't know that they can activate the Purple Poison, then you would be like, oh, I don't have to Gearfried negate or anything like that, but they can activate it, you know? Construct spellcaster. Dude, I thought every Shadal was a spellcaster, bro. Just put DNA surgery and the other thing that changes attribute to dark. Yeah, we have DNA surgery for spellcaster, and we have DNA transplant for dark. Thank you very much. Editor, put those on the screen, please. Thank you very much. Appreciate you, buddy. Has this been a successful lecture? I think this was a pretty good one. Don't forget to subscribe to youtube.com/distantcoder. And come check out the streams at twitch.tv/distantcoder. We do these classrooms every week on Fridays. Every week on Fridays moving forward, I'll be doing these classes. If you guys have any ideas specifically of what you would like me to do on these classrooms, like what topics you'd like me to cover, join my Discord, !Discord, but it's discord.gg/distantcoder. You can talk to me there. There's even a rulings chat in there. So if you guys on YouTube are looking for somewhere where you can ask rulings, we have a rulings chat in there that's pretty active. You can ask your ruling questions there and everything like that. I'm in there too, so I can answer your questions and stuff. I think that's where we call it, dude. Class dismissed, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody hold. You're not allowed. You cannot scatter until the bell. Okay, you must wait for the school bell. There it is. Class dismissed. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you all. Recess. You may all go chill and do what you need to do. All right. Go play with your Yu-Gi-Oh cards on the playground. And Timmy, stop chewing on your hair. Okay, Timmy, come on now. Timmy, stop chewing on your hair. So thank you so much for everything, y'all. I appreciate you guys. This is Professor Coder signing out, and I'll be seeing you guys next Friday for another lesson. Thanks so much. Have a good one. Peace out, y'all. Class is dismissed, everyone. Have a fun recess.